Hello and welcome back. Now, we all watch television, and I'm sure a lot of people might think it's a very glamorous area to work in, but is that really the case? On today's show, I'll be introducing you to three people who have incredibly successful careers in the media to find out what it's really like. My guests today are Gaynor Barnes and Christine Talbert, who are presenters on ITV's Calendar News, and Peggy Walker, who's a presenter on BBC's Radio Sheffield. Now, some people always knew what they wanted to be when they grew up, and Philip Schofield, for example, but for myself, I didn't have a plan. I know when I was young, I was always into making things, and when I was about 12, a magazine called Looking came out, and some of you might remember it. It was the children's version of the TV Times. Well, in the first edition, they had a cut-out TV studio. So I remember dragging my poor grandma all around the city centre looking for a copy, and I eventually found one. So all these years later, I managed to track one down on eBay. So I built it up again. So let's have a look. Anyway, let's find out what my guests wanted to be when they were young.
Always to do what I do now.
Really?
Yes, from a very young age. I think from about 13 or 14. The likes of Angela Rippon and Jan Leeming and Moira Stewart. Ladies were making an impact in news where before they never had done. It always had been a very male-dominated area. I'd always been very interested in stories. I always liked writing, and I was very interested in theatre and drama and all those sort of things. And it was kind of a combination of, I didn't want to go on the stage. That was something I never really thought was for me. I used to like to read, and I used to like to write too many stories, and I knew that I wanted to work in news. The icing on the cake would have been to broadcast it.
It always involved journalism writing. As a child, I used to make little newspapers with my sister. She didn't want to do it, but I made her. And we'd kind of do the Talbert news, and it would do silly things like that, and just go nosing around the house and getting a bit of gossip from what we could overhear Mum and Dad saying. And then we'd write it out and stick it on a piece of paper and stick some pictures on. So I suppose the instinct to do it was way back then. So yes, probably it was either that, publishing. I was always interested in reading, writing, something to do with words.
I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was good at English, so I went to university here in Sheffield to do English literature because it was a broad subject and I hadn't narrowed it down very much. And then it was just sort of, not by chance, I knew I wanted to work then in radio, but I didn't really know doing what. And then a family friend worked at a local radio station in Carlisle, where I'm from. So during my university holidays, I did work experience there, doing news reading, with absolutely no training, no preparation. They just sort of let me do it, which was great. And then that's when I got the bug for it, really, and thought, yeah, this is what I really want to do.
So like many people, I've had many different jobs over the years, so I asked my guests to tell me about their career paths.
I started off at the BBC as a trainee secretary. And I kind of worked my way through, and I did various training courses within the BBC, within the corporation, and I eventually did an editorial research attachment with the BBC, and that kind of launched all the things that have happened subsequently.
I did obviously my postgrad in journalism, and then my first job was as a reporter on the Southport Visitor over on Merseyside. And that was great. It was a real learning curve. You do all the basics. Like every day, one of us had to go walk down the seafront, which was lovely, to go to court, magistrates' court, and you'd literally just sit in court and pick up stories. And you got some really great stories came out of it. It was, in many ways, it taught me a lot about life, because you saw the darker side of life. But you'd have to go and talk to the local. Then you went around to the police station, and they made you a cup of tea. So it was really very basic journalism, but taught me an awful lot about how to dig out a story, how to find a story. So it was a very, very good learning ground.
The first job in the industry was at Radio Leeds, where I'd had a placement off my course, as part of my course at Trinity and All Saints. I got a work placement at Radio Leeds, and then was kept on around Christmas time and was freelancing. So there, and Radio Humberside as well. I did a bit of freelancing in the early days.
Written word and to broadcast or to deliver or to present was always what I wanted to do. So I was lucky. I mean, within the time at the BBC, I never was actually in front of the camera. I was always behind, but that gave me a very good grounding. And the editor I worked for at the time said he felt that I had the ability and the talent to do it. He just couldn't offer me a job there and then, because that's not the way it happens. Maybe in books or films it does, but not in real life, and or certainly not for me. And he said, you need to go and do your apprenticeship, you need to go and work out within the regions. And that's what I did. I had a fantastic show reel. I read the BBC's Lunchtime News, which I sent to every region, both BBC and ITV. And off the back of that, I had several letters that said, come and see us. I had a lot of rejections. And the ones that said, come and see us, 3 of them followed up with a job placement. And ITV Yorkshire was the best. I had a 6-month, not an attachment, but 6-month job contract. And the BBC gave me a 2-year career break. So I was really in a win-win situation. And I came here, it just felt right. And then I got another 6-month contract, and then I got another year. And then by the time I was due to go back to the BBC, I was just about to go to Australia with Mike Best, who I believe you know, yes. To work on a programme called It's a Vet's Life. I had so many other programmes that I did other than news, and a lot of feature things which I really enjoyed, meeting people and being out. And again, that storytelling, telling people stories, which is what I'd always enjoyed. And so I resigned from the BBC, much to my mother's worry, to give up a staff job and a pension, and I came to Yorkshire in 1991, not knowing a soul, and I've never looked back, and I've loved every minute of it.
I went on to an evening paper and then simply applied for a job that was coming up at the BBC in Manchester at the time, on North West Tonight. I went for that job but didn't get it, and they said to me, would you like to just do the odd shift here and there? So I'd work at the newspaper in the day, and then I'd drive over to Manchester and do the night shift. In the newsroom there, working with the late presenter. And after about 6 months of doing that, the next job that came up, they offered it to me, and I ended up going to work as a reporter. And by chance, the presenting thing came along. I'd been sent on a course to London, to the BBC headquarters at Shepherd's Bush, and part of that course was to do a bit of presenting training, which I'd never done before. And about 3 weeks later, I was on the early shift back at the BBC as the journalist writing bulletins. And Nigel came in, who was the presenter, and he was just green at the gills. He looked terrible, and he said, I don't think I can make it through this morning. He got through the first bulletin and then just started to be sick everywhere. And basically, we rang the boss and said, what we're going to do. And he said, well, you were on that course last week. Can you do it? So I ended up just out of the blue with nothing to wear, having to present. I was like a frightened rabbit. I've never been so terrified in my life. But that's how I started presenting, because after that they said, oh well, you can carry on doing a bit.
Always really been at BBC local radio stations. I worked a little bit in Huddersfield at a radio station which I don't think exists anymore now, when I was on the course, right, which was good, called Home FM, and that was a great sort of, I was getting paid for it, but it was a great way to sort of learn the ropes as well, which was good. Well, I was still on the course, so when I'd finished the course I was ready to work and get straight into it.
My guests have enjoyed many years of working in the media industry, so I asked them to tell me what have been the highlights of their careers so far.
We used to do a lot of feature programmes, and we would often sort of embrace stories and develop them and make them into bigger things. And at that time, the Deep had just evolved in Hull, and I was there literally when the first foundation stones went in. But I was very fortunate to be chosen to go and see the curator choose some of the fish and the species and the corals and all the different things. I had to learn to dive, something I never thought would be anything I would be able to do, but I did. I managed, I passed, I've got my PADI qualification, and again it opened up a whole new world under the sea, which was fascinating. So I did do some diving in Australia and Fiji, but the shark diving was then they did a conservation programme for half an hour, 2 half-hour programmes. And Peter Benchley, who wrote Jaws, I think he came to the Deep and actually gave a lecture and said he could not write the book now because it's so untrue about the great white. It isn't this, this man killer, this predatory thing that goes around the seas looking for human beings to have for tea. That's so not true. And he wanted to sort of dispel, and this is what the Deep was all about. They wanted to sort of the conservation of sharks, and there were lots of certain types of shark were, could be extinct if the killing was going on and one thing and another. So I was asked to go out and to dive with the great white, and I have to say I have seen Jaws and it did frighten the life out of me. But again, it was an experience that I never ever thought I would ever do. I'm not saying I'd rush back to do it again. it was exhilarating. It was very, very frightening and very rewarding afterwards. And it was wonderful to work with a great team of people, very much as a team, and all very much reliant on one another, and what you all pull together. And we made some very good little programmes, and I'm very proud of them.
I don't think I'd say there's one thing really. I think we've just been presenting this programme. I mean, I know in this region what calendar means to people, and I know the big shoes I'm following, like people like Richard Whiteley, people are talking about Marilyn Webb, and we lost Marilyn last year sadly, but you know, these are people that people have grown up with. So to be kind of custodian of a great institution is a real thing to be proud of, and I'm very proud of that.
I was at Radio Lincolnshire actually, and I was just getting to the stage of my career where I was thinking, I can kind of feel like I could do all the shifts and maybe think about where do I go next. And it was my manager there at Radio Lincolnshire that said, he didn't know I was thinking this, but he said, have you ever fancied presenting? And I thought, well, that's actually something in the newsroom that I've not done and I haven't really considered it properly. He sent me on a course, and then I got sort of stand-in shifts, and turns out I was quite good at it and really like doing it. So I've just been trying to get as much presenting as I can get really since I realised I can do it.
Right.
Good afternoon, this is Peggy Walker on BBC Radio Sheffield here. It's just coming up to 10 to 5.
Yes.
Well, give me a call and let me know how you feel about that. 0114 279 6699, or you can always text me 81333. Start your text with the word Sheffield.
Whilst carrying out research for this programme, I managed to unearth some very interesting and amusing stories about my guests. So here is Christine Talbert admitting to one of them.
It was a story at the end of calendar in the days when we always used to do something a bit stupid at the end of calendar. Calendar's always had a bit of a quirky reputation, and lots of things that probably other regional programmes wouldn't do. We're a bit more corporate now we're all one big ITV, but we were timed. We had a minute to eat a donut without licking our lips. Yeah. So Richard, they had a camera on Richard, a camera on me, and we were such a mess at the end of it, honestly. But yeah, that's certainly something, isn't it? That's a bit different, isn't it?
It certainly is.
So
is it possible to eat them without licking your lips?
No, he won it. He won it. He won it. I just kind of made a mess, looked ridiculous.
I'm going to have a go now. You do realise this, don't you? Okay, the test is to see if I can eat a donut for a minute without licking my lips. Okay, so ready and go. Well, I did it, but it's not easy. Give it a go and see what you think. Being a presenter must have given my guests the opportunity to meet some incredibly interesting people, so I asked them to tell me who have made the biggest impact on them.
I never thought I'd ever interview a Prime Minister. I didn't think I'd travel the world and meet, you know, people from our region, doing things in wonderful and weird and wonderful places. I've been very humbled by people I've met.
I recently interviewed the sister of Anne Maguire, the teacher that was shot last year at Corpus Christi School in Leeds, and it was a very emotional interview. She's talking about, you know, obviously the effect on her and her family. And you can't help but get affected by it, and you have to try to, you know, not to get too upset, because you've got to think how you're actually doing a job of work. But I have become quite friendly with her and since then, and so I'm not one of these people that can just go in and do an interview and never speak to anybody again. I do tend to form bonds with people, and they become friends, and I'm glad I do, because this job has allowed me to meet many people, extraordinary people that I would never have had the chance to meet.
I remember meeting one lady who had adopted 2 young children. I mean, she worked in a special school anyway. She had 4 children of her own. She'd adopted 2 who'd both been so badly maltreated. One of the little girls had been thrown against a wall and was severely brain damaged. And I thought, she's just so giving. She gives of herself all the time, and I feel I'm relatively selfish because I don't give of myself all the time. And I was just, you know, you can meet people that are quite ordinary, maybe, but do extraordinary things. And I think that has been one of the joys of the job, is dipping into people's lives for an hour, 2 hours, a week, a month, whatever, a moment. And often you can go home and different people you've met, or just their passion for something, their enthusiasm, your bewilderment that somebody can be interested in something such as that. It has been amazing.
My favourite people are sort of local and real people, so maybe I had a really good teacher on last week who had been doing an experiment with some pupils in Whitehaven where they'd sent a camera up on a weather balloon to record pictures of the Earth, but the camera had gone missing, and he was really gutted about it. And I was sort of making a joke like, oh, sometimes science experiments go wrong. Well, this school in Whitehaven haven't had very good luck, but he was absolutely gutted about it. So that was a good interview, really, because I thought it would be all jokey, but he was really cut up about. But they did find it as well. The next week they found it. Wow. Some Duke of Edinburgh students had stumbled across this sort of polystyrene box with a burst weather balloon connected onto it.
I remember meeting Penelope Keith, who I'd grown up with as Margot, in The Good Life. She was so ordinary in the nicest possible way. You just imagine this posh lady, and she was refined. I'm not saying she wasn't, but I just. It was wonderful to meet her, absolutely wonderful. And other people throughout, different people. I would never have ever thought, as a young girl growing up down south, dare I say, that I would ever have had the opportunity to have met so many people that, famous and non-famous people that have really affected my life.
Look who Gaynor got to meet. Not that I'm jealous, actually I so am. So I believe you met Donny Osmond.
I did, yes.
Tell me about that.
Obviously we're obviously ladies of a certain age that remember the lovely Donny Osmond. In fact, I came back off holiday yesterday, and they were playing one of his songs on the plane, and there was all these ladies, and we were all singing, and I thought it just tickled me. But I have to say I wasn't a massive fan when I was a teenager. I was more of sort of a David Essex girl, if I was honest. But I think Donny has stood the test of time, most probably better than all. And when he came in, there was a real buzz around the newsroom. Oh, he's here. And they'd even put some barriers up, and there was women of my age hanging outside the building. And he, go meet him. We always would try and meet a guest before we interviewed them. And he was just in the gentleman's changing room, so he was just about to come out and knocked on the door and whatever. And I said, Donny, I'm Gaynor Barnes, I'm going to be interviewing. And he just took my hand and he kissed it, and he went, it's a pleasure. And I thought, you have no idea of the pleasure that you have just given me. And he really played the game. He was wonderful. He was absolutely wonderful. He was great. And I went home and I was a teenager all over again. And I think my allegiance to David Essex kindly moved to Donny.
And I'm still jealous. If they had the opportunity to interview anybody, who would it be? For me, I would love to interview Noel Fitzpatrick, the super vet, but this is who Christine Talbert said she'd like to interview.
Kate Middleton.
Yeah.
I think she'd be great because you don't really ever see her do an interview. And I'm not really sure she ever has done, other than at the side of William. But I'd like to do her.
Yes.
Yeah, even though she's not, actually her family do come back to Leeds. So I think that she descends from a Leeds family. Yeah. So that would be the justification.
I was very interested to hear what careers my guests would have followed had they not worked in the media industry. So let's find out.
To go a completely different way, I would have done geography at university and done something in sort of ecology, or something where I was outdoors and wearing wellies and in nature. Which it could have been. I'm sure I do remember tossing a coin to decide if I did geography or English at university.
I've often thought about what else I would have done. When I was young, I only ever thought that I wanted to work in broadcasting. I never wanted to work in news. That was all I could see. I don't know what I would have done. I was offered a job with a bank, the Midland Bank as it was known then, now as the HSBC, to do a traineeship there. And I most probably would have taken that if the BBC offer hadn't have come along. But in my heart of hearts, the one thing I love and enjoy very much is travelling. And I think I would have gone into travel in some capacity. I know a girl I worked with at the BBC. We were both production assistants at the time, and she'd just come off the QE2. She'd worked on the cruise ship for 5 or 6 years, working as the captain's secretary. And I thought, what a wonderful job. And I said, why would you give up a job like that? She said, well, when you've been around the world as many times as I have, you want to get off.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, how lovely to go when you're young to do these things.
Yeah.
Well, I probably would have ended up being an English teacher, teaching sixth form, and immersing myself in novels, and because that was always my work. I loved all that and still do. My daughter actually, you know, she's a good reader now, which I'm pleased about. So I think I'd have enjoyed it. And they get good holidays, which I obviously made the wrong decision there, didn't I?
Working in the media industry is a very competitive field to get into, so I asked my guests what advice they would give to anybody who wanted to follow in their footsteps.
Well, I can only really talk about the radio industry specifically, I suppose, but it's trying to get the placements, and I know a lot of the time these days it has to be done all officially and through a course. My course at Trinity and All Saints definitely got me my job today, because I got those work placements and, you know, paid work at Huddersfield, and then you do the work placement, and if you're any good you get kept on. I don't think I was outstanding when I was on work placements, but we sometimes get people who you just think, do you even care about this job? Like, what, you know, you get to be enthusiastic when you're on placements. If you manage to get a placement, really make the most of it, because we get a lot of people who, to me, don't seem that excited to be there, and I kind of think, well, you're not going to stand out if you don't even speak to people, or you don't sort of make an impact. You don't need to be, you know, loud and obnoxious, just really make the most of any sort of hands-on experience you get.
I would say it's a tough industry. It's become tougher over the years. It's actually harder probably to get long-term contracts. Everything these days does seem to be short-term contracts. But if you can get an in any way, I've found that people who are in and can impress tend to be the ones considered when the jobs come up. So I would say get in and impress in any way you can. Yeah. You know, work hard. We do get a lot of people who come in and they'll sometimes say, well, I just want to be on the telly. And I think you've got to be prepared to do the graft and do all the rubbishy stuff, which we've all done. You know, before you can do that, you've got to be a proper hard-working journalist, really, in this industry. Yeah.
Well, nowadays, I said to you earlier, I came out of school and I did a traineeship with the BBC as in a secretarial capacity. If people want to work as a journalist, if they want to work in a newsroom, that's not the way. I mean, I'm not saying it won't happen again, I don't know, who knows. But I do think nowadays it is going through, you do need to have, there's so much competition, you do need the degrees, you do need your postgrad in broadcast journalism, you need to be enthusiastic, you need to be there, you want to do any kind of work placement, and the young people that we do have that come in and are very excited, they stand out, you know, and are more likely to be given an opportunity at a later date if there is an opportunity. We've had a nice young lad, call them young, I could be their mother, he's so enthusiastic about his sport, and he came in weekends and all sorts of things. Now he's working permanently for us, you know, and that's in a relatively short space of time. Yes. So but you do need the qualifications, and you need the enthusiasm, and you mustn't give up. If it's what you really want to do, you mustn't give up.
So as we have seen, working in the media industry can be very interesting and exciting. But after chatting to Christine Gaynor and Peggy, what came across most to me was their passion for what they do. If you're also interested in a career in the media, if you're passionate about it, you'll probably be successful. So good luck and see you next time.